choose Mythology by Roland Barthes. Um, um, and I will have about the poor man and the proletarian, about the great man, the great family man, an exhibition from 1956 in Paris, and then about the myth on the right. Um, so, and first of all, I need to start this time. Wait. So, yes, first of all, I'll just give a little introduction in semiotics. And it's actually not by Roland Barthes, but Roland Barthes was very well known in using these terms in more complex way when it comes to like myth. Here's a more simplified version. You see the two that is knowing from it. Ferdinand de Saussure, I'm not sure I'm like pronounced it well, and Charles Sanders Pereira from the United States. And the signifier is basically the person who adds, example, a name you see like Rose here, and the signified is the one who interpreted the word rose and had this thought how the rose looks like. Another example you see is like this alarm goes off, and the symbol symbolize the alarm, and the index indicates the smoke. And in that way, there's a relationship between icons, symbols, and index. But yeah, let's go further. So, the poor man and proletariat is Roland Barthes' description of the Charles Chaplin man. I mean, it's basically like you see this labor worker who is played by Charles Chaplin, where Chaplin is been presented as the labor worker who's been forced to the extreme, where he has to like basically accept to be tossed around by his employers and the work owners in all sorts of very bombastic and how can I say abusive way, and it comes out very like even like it is made for even children to like recognize the madness of the incident. But yeah, so it's just an indication of how the world runs around, or how it had been, but maybe still is. But yeah, going further, The Great Family of Man was an exhibition that took place in 1956 in Paris, but actually it was like what I could like find out, actually an exhibition that went through many cities in Europe plus United States and in Asia as well. But it was an exhibition that Roland Barthes actually criticized because he found it very unauthentic. He criticized the lack of authenticity. Um, let me see time. Um, and yeah, he adds like some very interesting reflection of what it was exactly that was not authentic in this sentence. Um, I can read like example, the unity of human species is here amply moralized and sentimentalized we are at the outset directed to this ambiguous myth of the human community, which serves as an alibi to a large part of our humanism. Um, so yeah, I just read here, he gives the reader a critique of how the old world is built up. His question is critical towards the old world in his observation that leaves the question open to the reader about his critical perception, moralized and sentimentalized reality, and then the embodied reality that show another scenario when it comes to our true nature and the history of man. He moves on by mention M. André Chamson, who wrote that this book looks all the human conditions, or the human condition must somewhat resemble the benevolent gaze of God on an absurd and sublime anthill. And I, as a reader, understand this as it is God who mocks the human from the totally empowerment, from a totally empowerment position. Barth continues with his critical words. The, the, the quotations often are primitive proverbs or verses from the Old Testament. They all define our internal wisdom, a class of assertions which escape history. The earth is a mother who never dies. Eat, breathe, and salt, and speak the truth, etc. This is the reign of gnomic truth. The meetings of all the ages of humanity are the most neutral points of the nature, the point where the obviousness of the truism has no longer any value except in the realm of purely poetic language. Everything here, the content and appeal of the pictures, the discourse which justifies them, aims to suppress the determining weight of history. We are held back at the surface of an identity prevented precisely by sentimentality from penetrating into the ulterior zone of human behavior where historical alienation introduces some differences which we shall here quote simply call injustices. And there's more into it, but what Barth is like saying is also like that the lack of authenticity also is that he don't see nature in its true form, and also his history is like being in some way what do you call it, censored away. And he's like saying the states of exhibition are easy misconception because if one is being taken out of history, there's nothing more to say about them, and to comment about them is being told tautological, which meaning expressing the same thing twice, meaningless slogans. Barth continues about birth that he don't understand the whole process about birth because it compared to the whole mass of issues that life brings. I have here a picture of some children that have been like actually been set up by the photographer in these settings, and that is what Barth don't like, that these images is in some way unreal to it lacks the full description of, yeah, it lacks he tries to like say there's a lack of, I mean, in the word where I begin with, there's a lack of authenticity, is like it is a setup, and that's basically what he's into explaining. But the explanation is far beyond what I like perform here. Let me see. Yeah, time is already up. the last and foremost, and which is actually what is most difficult to explain, is the myth on the right, because there's a lot to it. And let me sit down because I actually need to read what is captivated here. So Barth is actually um, explaining what myth is. He's like saying that to simplify its complexity, Barth basically talk about that myth statistically lean to the right because the right keeps the myth alive and expansive, by example, hiding the lie of illusion. Barth makes a statement. The oppressed is nothing. He has only one language, that of his emancipation. The oppressor is everything. His language is rich, multiform, supplied with all the possible degrees of dignity. And its disposal, he has an exclusive right to meta-language. The oppressed makes the world. He has only an active, transitive, political language. The oppressor conserves it. His language is plenary, intransitive, gestural, theatrical. It is myth, the language of the former aims at transforming, of the latter at internalizing. So myth is in description besides its ability to broaden and expand one's mind, also at the unsure and unbalanced of nature itself. There are degrees to myth's ability to do so. Some myths work in some social realms better than others, and there are microclimates within myth. Barth continues with that myth rippens or material when it spreads. It is hard to trace a geographical map of myth, and especially because the lack of analytical sociology by the press, but there is already a place for the myth. The map is best recognized in the rhetorical form the bureaucrats use in their linguistic. The rhetoric tries not to affect the plasticity of the signifier and already sufficiently conceptualized adaptation to the historical representation of the world. There's a lot of complex words, but he's like giving like a very detailed map of example with the rhetoric way of how myth is being expressed, and then he also go into like something about inoculation, which means the immunizing someone against a disease. And yeah, time is already up. I'm here 12 minutes something. But yeah, already too long. I would just like to finish that this would need a longer time to actually finish, but he adds to the myth, besides what I already mentioned, inoculation, the privation of history, identification, and tautology. And also he mentioned Niedernorism. Yeah, and that's it. I can't even finish what all this topic is about, but thank you very much, and yes, that's it.